Hi, I'm Dave with CanyonChasers.net. Today, we get to spend the afternoon with the brand new V-Strom 1000, the second generation of the V-Strom. Now, when you look at the spec sheet and you look at the V-Strom compared to all the other bikes out there, it seems to fall a little bit short. But we're going to ride it and see what real-world application is actually like. And quite honestly, we really like this beige color. All clear. And still all clear. Let's talk for a minute about the numbers that count, the numbers that most of us actually pay attention to. Suzuki claims this thing comes in at about 500 pounds with a tank of gas, which is actually pretty light. That puts it about 75 to 100 pounds lighter than pretty much most of the competition, with the exception of the Multistrada 1200 and the Tiger 800, but it's not much of a difference there. I mean, it's kind of splitting hairs. But in the horsepower range, Suzuki claims this thing makes about 115 horsepower and 70 torques, which is a little on the low side compared to the other big kids on the block. Like BMW claims 125 horsepower and 90 torques. The Multistrada and the KTM, they're now claiming 160 horsepower and 90 torques. Really, the only one that's pretty close is the Yamaha Super Tenere, which is about 105 and 85 torques or so. But the Super Tenere also weighs about 100 pounds more than this V-Strom. This V-Strom that we're riding right now is the base model. It's about $13,000 retail. For about $1,200 more, you can get the Adventure. The Adventure comes with saddlebags and crash guards and hand guards and a bunch of other little goodies. But that makes the V-Strom really priced well. All the other bikes kind of out there are going to be between $20,000 and $22,000. Certainly all the Europeans. Now this V-Strom uses the same motor as the last V-Strom, the Gen 1 V-Strom, which is actually a motor that was developed almost 20 years ago, and it first came out in 1997 in the Suzuki DL1000S and then eventually the DL1000R, which were designed and built to be Ducati killers, and they were. They had way more horsepower than the Ducati 996 of its day, and they were a great motor. I actually had a TL1000S. And put a lot of miles on it. Loved the bike. The motor was actually too powerful for the frame. The bike was known as the Widowmaker because the bike was so strong when you pull out of corners, the front end would get light and you'd get these head shakes coming out of corners. And so the bike really wasn't all that popular. It was kind of a sales flop. But then they eventually put the motor into the V-Strom. And I think this motor works really great in the V-Strom. I mean, it feels a lot faster than what it should be. This motor is just really strong. Another interesting thing about this motor is they use a really unique system to move the camshafts. They use a chain half of the way, and then the chain turns a bunch of gears, and then the top half of the motor is basically a gear-driven camshaft, which is why this motor has that really unique whine when you get on the throttle. It has a really unique sound. And I can tell you, having owned one of these, that gear-driven cam on the top made valve adjustments just a snap. It was really easy. When you're adjusting the valves, you basically just take the camshaft out, and you set it aside, adjust the valves and put it back in, so timing is really easy. It's really a nice motor. And honestly, I forgot just how good this transmission is. It is buttery smooth. This transmission is just exceptional. I mean, the bike only has 200 miles on it, and it's just shifting so nice. I will say this though, you can really tell the exhaust pipe on this thing is really kind of restricting. Now I'm normally not an exhaust system kind of guy, but I really think this bike would benefit hugely from a slip-on and a power commander. I think it would just really liven this engine up. I bet you would make it probably more comparable to what GS claims their bike's making with just a slip-on and a power commander. So if you're considering this bike, really look into the possibility of putting on a slip-on and a power commander. Through these fast sweepers, this bike really does great, but I can tell this front wheel, this 19-inch front wheel, is just kind of slow. It doesn't want to change direction. It's really hard to be precise with this 19-inch front wheel. It's really kind of odd. This bike has such great handling characteristics. It has kind of like super bike spec brakes and this really strong suspension, and I'm kind of really slowed down by this front wheel. It's not really allowing me to really kind of toss this bike through the corners the way I'd like to. I would love to see this bike with maybe an option, an X version or whatever, that has 17-inch wheels. If this bike had like a 180/55 on the rear and a 120/70 on the front, I think this thing would be on par with the Multistrada for how well this thing gets through the twisty bits. But with this 19-inch front wheel, it's just kind of not there. I mean, depending on how you ride, you may not notice it, but if you're a sporty kind of guy, this is the one fly in the ointment I've kind of noticed. Really, dude, great place for a U-turn. Something else I've kind of noticed about this bike is that even with the traction control set in the lowest level, the ABS and the traction control are a little intrusive. I kind of wish that I could dial those back just a notch, but that may just be me and how I ride. I think for most people, the traction control and the ABS on this bike is pretty good. And when you have a touring bike like this, a bike where you're going to ride into all kinds of weather and all kinds of road surfaces, I really love having that traction control and that ABS. Now, I'm a big believer in not relying on the technology. I don't think that's a good way to use this, but it's really fantastic to kind of view it as a helping hand. You know, like you're braking hard into a corner and there's a little bit of gravel and that ABS just kind of looks out for you. Like I said, I wouldn't rely on this technology, but it's nice to be there. My goal with all this technology is to ride in a manner that never activates the traction control or the ABS. But it's really nice having this on a bike priced at this point. You know, I mean, what, $13,000 and you get ABS and traction control? That's really nice. The nice thing about this bike is they've really upped the suspension from the old V-Strom. I mean, this has a really nice inverted fork, cartridge fork that's adjustable. The shock looks pretty good. I mean, they are kind of budget items. They could be improved. You could put a cartridge kit in the fork, or you could replace the rear shock, and I think it would really transform this bike. But honestly, out of the box, this suspension's pretty good. The damping rates are nice. It might be a smidgen over damp, but you could probably tune that out, but it's not enough for even to get me to get off the bike and fiddle with it. The suspension just works. I really like, too, how the front fender provides great coverage for the fork. The slider is really out of harm's way. It's going to be hard for a rocker or something to kind of come in there and chip your fork tube, so that's a nice little feature. Plus, these brakes are just incredible. These are actually a really high-spec monoblock brake that they put on the Gixxer 1000. So the brakes are fantastic. I mean, I'd actually put these brakes up against the Brembos on the Multistrada. In fact, they actually might be a little better than the Brembos on the Multistrada. Now, actually, the fueling on this bike is really quite good. It's exceptional. I mean, it really carburetes, if that's really the right word, really nicely. It's really clean throttle response. Right now, we're right about 10,000 feet, and we're coming up to a really tight switchback up here that's really going to test it. Let's see how she does. And, oh, that was nice. That was really clean. Not a single stumble or a hiccup as we pulled out of there. That was really fantastic. So yeah, the fueling on this bike is really exceptional. And I mean, we're at high elevation. Usually that altitude really kind of exaggerates any problems with the fueling, and this bike is doing great. One thing about this 19-inch front wheel and the smaller back wheel, they're kind of dirt bike-sized tires, is the 19-inch front wheel, it's actually larger in relation to the size of the bump. So the tire is theoretically going to be affected less by bumps in the road. So, I mean, you heard me complaining about the tire. It's always a trade-off. That's why I think for how this bike is really behaving, it'd be nice to have the option for that 17-inch front wheel. But if you're like a dirt bike guy, or you want to make this thing an off-road bike, it would be great if they had spokes, because spokes are really better for when you want to bang down dirt roads and hit rocks and stuff like that. These cast wheels are pretty delicate. You hit a rock with these cast wheels, and I've seen them just shatter, come to pieces. So you got to be careful with these cast wheels. So it'd be nice if it seems like the wheels, you know, if you're on a smooth asphalt kind of guy, there's really no benefit to having the 19 other than it really kind of slows down the steering. But if you're on one of these like bumpy, crumbly roads, like this road we're on now, this is a Pineview Road, and they paved this road actually for the Tour of Utah for the bicycles to climb up. But it's a bumpy asphalt road, and this is where the 19 is kind of nice. It's not dramatic. A 17 is pretty decent here. I mean, the road's just bumpy. You're not going to really be able to go too fast anyway, but that's where the 19 kind of comes into play. Well, those are our thoughts on the V-Strom 1000. Overall, the bike really exceeded our expectations in every way. The motor is still just a peach. Like we said, the only thing we really don't like about the bike are the wheels. For this size wheel, we would rather they be spokes, so it would be a much more capable off-road motorcycle where you wouldn't worry so much about banging against rocks, something you really don't want to do with cast wheels. If the wheels are going to be cast, we would rather they be 17-inch wheels, so the bike would handle better in the twisty tarmac sections of the road. But beyond that, the motorcycle is refreshingly simple and straightforward. It has all the tech that you use with none of the fluff that kind of gets in the way. We really like this motorcycle a lot, and for the price, we really don't think it can be beat. Sure, there's things that could be improved, but you could improve those as you go along and improve the items that are more important to you as you go. Well, we really want to thank Honda Suzuki of Salt Lake for making this all happen. If you're in the area, it's a wonderful shop. Stop in, ask for Brian, tell him we sent you. He will totally take care of you. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and ride well.